When you sit down to create an encounter for your D&D players, you of course want that encounter to be as exciting as possible, and that is also true at the lower levels, which is why in this video we're going to look at some of the most exciting, most fun, most interesting monsters that you can find below 1 CR. Now, it's probably not a secret that monsters below 1 CR are rarely the most exciting, especially because most of them we get from the original monster manual, and that book had an unfortunate tendency to make every monster, especially low CR monsters, especially beasts, simply a monster with maybe keen senses, maybe pack tactics if you're lucky, and then an attack, maybe 2 attacks if you're really lucky. So that of course makes it a bit hard to find particularly exciting monsters below 1 CR, but there are actually a few that are really exciting for what they are, a low CR monster. One monster that I think is very exciting for its CR is the Cockatrice. It's at a half CR, so it's a reasonably easy challenge, you would think, but it has the ability to petrify targets. Now this can of course be very dangerous because at this low CR, even if it's a bit low, Constitution saving throw could be failed and failed twice, so you end up petrifying your players. The good thing about this is that this petrification only lasts 24 hours, so even if the players, let's say, run into a pack of cockatrices and are all turned to stone, they'll just have to stand there for a while as stoned, and then they will come back to themselves even if they don't have access to greater restoration or stuff like that. So in this way, the Cockatrice can be a very fun and engaging encounter even though it is a low CR creature, and can be a really dangerous encounter. The Darkmantle is very exciting for its half CR because it has this ability to crush someone where it sort of envelops them and then it impairs it in various ways, and it becomes a very great nuisance. And at the same time, it can also make a darkness aura sort of around it, which can also hugely impact the battlefield. So in this way, the Darkmantle, even at its low CR, has some abilities and some features that can really change the way an encounter is fought and can challenge the character to come up with different tactics than just hit until something dies. The Rust monster is another D&D classic that most veteran players and DMs will know, and while it's not particularly strong, it has this ability to corrode armors and weapons, which of course is any fighter or barbarian's nightmare. For this reason, the Rust monster can put some tension into a combat that otherwise wouldn't probably be too exciting. It can be a challenge even though it's quite easily killed. The players are never in danger of dying. The players are in danger of losing that awesome sparkly new armor they just bought, and that in itself can bring a lot of tension to the encounter. The Shadow is one of my favorites. Now, I will admit it's not one of the more dynamic monsters. It really only has one attack, and then it has the ability to hide in shadows. It also has some resistances and stuff that can make it actually a bit more difficult than its CR, I would say, because at this low level, not a lot of player characters have access to magical weapons, and it also has resistances to a pretty large selection of elemental or spell damage types. The interesting thing about the Shadow is its ability to sort of soak or absorb strength from the characters or steal their strength away, and this for me is just always great because on one hand it takes the barbarian and the fighter and makes them actually worse in the combat that they're fighting right now, which can impact the combat and how it's fought, and it's also a way we can sort of punish these min-maxing characters, the wizard who dumped their strength, the cleric and so on, because we can go in and target them with a shadow or two, and the combat will very quickly feel incredibly dangerous, even at higher levels. So if you have a shadow or a pack of shadows, let's say 5-6 shadows, that can be a real challenge for a party of 3rd or 4th level adventurers, granted that they can't just turn on dead or something to get rid of them. Now let's take a look at some of the monsters that we can find outside the monster manual and the core rule books, because there are some really interesting and very dynamic monsters in subsequent source books. The Starspawn Grue isn't particularly dangerous, but it does have an aura that can be a true nuisance to characters even at higher levels. Because when the Starspawn Grue is near to a creature, that creature has disadvantage on attacks against other creatures than the Starspawn Grue, and they also have disadvantage on saving throws. In addition, this Starspawn Grue has a bite attack that can make it so that attack rolls against the creature have advantage onto the Starspawn Grue's next turn. So this is really a support creature, a minion creature that can be really annoying, and something that the characters may want to focus their attention on first before really engaging with the bigger monster that the Starspawn Grue should be properly found with. So if you have a villain, you can put a bunch of these out to sort of harass and annoy the players, get close to them, take their attention, make them less capable fighters, and that is really something that can enhance the combat and change how the characters think about their tactics. Another fun creature is of course the Gazer. Everyone loves Beholders, and in Volo's Guide to Monsters, or whatever it's called, we get the Gazer, which is just a watered down Beholder that we can pick up at a really low CR. And like its bigger cousin, the Gazer has eye rays that are random, that can target different saving throws and cause different effects. And while these effects are of course not as dangerous as a true Beholder's eye rays, the Gazer is really a dynamic creature that will force the characters to think on their feet, to give them that sense of, oh, what eye ray am I going to be hit with next? And a couple of Gazers in a combat with a bigger villain or creature is something that can really cause a lot of havoc, cause a lot of chaos in the combat, and that to me is always really fun. So yeah, that's some of my favorite monsters at below 1 CR, and in the upcoming videos we'll also take a look at monsters at higher CRs. I plan to go through it just one by one, take it 1 CR, 2 CR, all the way to 20 if there's an interest in that, because picking out and selecting the right monsters for an encounter is something that I invest a lot of energy into, because I believe that if you put those 5 minutes into selecting the right monster, that can really make a combat encounter twice as good as it otherwise would be. I also want to thank our patrons over at patreon.com/eventyr for helping me decide on this topic for this video, and especially for our legend tier patrons, which will be coming up on the screen right now. The support that I get from these people is what keeps this channel going, keeps me making videos, and I love putting out polls about which videos to make and sort of see where the community is at, which sort of videos would be interesting. So if you're interested in getting a lot of 5e content, access to a whole library of adventures, encounters, maps, monsters, magic items, and so on, and also want to have a stake in deciding which videos are made on the channel, please check out patreon.com/eventyr. There will be a link to that in the description down below. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you so much for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.